The month of March cannot decide whether to be sunny and bright or dark and dreary or somewhere in between. But with the melting of the thick snow this winter left us with has come a spirit of renewed energy and passion. I've been able to get outside a lot, play lots of disc golf, which is my husband's favorite hobby, spend quality time with my friends, and read wonderful books of all different colors and flavors. It's a rainy, dreary day, so it seems like the perfect time to go book shopping. Hello. So I did manage to pick up a few books at the thrift store, and a number of them were actually on my TBR list for the year, so that worked out perfectly. If you watched my last video, you know that I just read Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall and Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge in these beautiful old vintage Penguin Classic editions. So I found a Penguin Classic edition of Leo Tolstoy's Resurrection, which I've been meaning to read, and I love these editions. I just like the kind of yellowed paper, the smell of old book, and these are really lightweight and easy to carry around. I can literally walk around my house reading, which I do frequently to get a little bit of exercise in here and there. So yeah, that's the first book I got, Leo Tolstoy's Resurrection. I also got the Annals of Tacitus, so the reigns of Tiberius, Claudius, and Nero. Just a big old ancient history text here. I'm working on collecting most of the ancient texts because I do want to make my way through them. I don't think I'm going to get to Tacitus very soon. I'm currently reading through Livy, The War with Hannibal, with my class, and I just have enough ancient history reading on the go right now. But one day I'll get to Tacitus's Annals. Then I found The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is kind of a weird edition. It's just published by Arcturus. It's not like an academic edition at all. This book has been on my TBR for a while, so I figured I should just grab it, even if it wasn't the prettiest. That's that. And then, finally, two most beautiful editions of the tragedies of William Shakespeare, Volume 1 and Volume 2. They are stunning, and Volume 1 has Troilus and Cressida, Coriolanus, Titus and Andronicus, Romeo and Juliet, Timon of Athens, Julius Caesar, and Macbeth. Just finished reading Macbeth with my students. We've been doing a study of that. And then Volume 2 has Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, King Lear, Othello, the Moor of Venice, one of my favorite Shakespeare plays, Antony and Cleopatra. I also already read that one this year. Cymbeline, and then Pericles, Prince of Tyre. So, yeah, I mean, I have the full works of William Shakespeare already, and then I have a number of single copies of single plays. But, I mean, come on, I need these tragedies as well. Everyone needs to have the tragedies of William Shakespeare in beautiful old tomes somewhere in their home. And I do hope to read more Shakespeare this year, so it'll be easy to just kind of pick up with one of these. I find shopping for books at the thrift store is getting more and more difficult. I don't know why. Like, first of all, I basically only look at the classics section in my local thrift store, and it's one of the smallest sections of books there. But generally, there's a decent selection, but they're so expensive. You know, $10, $6, $4.99 for basically anything. And some of these are like really old and kind of in shambles. And they're still charging so much for them. I don't understand it, but like the idea of going to the thrift store to get things cheap is just not a thing anymore. So yeah, it's not always easy to collect books on a budget, I guess, but that's okay. I'm glad I still did find the ones that I did, and I will need to find somewhere to put them in my tiny house that's already a little full of books. It's final essays weeks. The next few weeks I am trying to finish up my 2 final essays, get them submitted, and then essentially my second semester for my master's in history will be done. So I'm looking forward to being done by the beginning of April and having a lot more time to spend on creative projects, on just going outside, seeing people, reading, and yeah, just not having the stress of deadlines and consistent homework hanging over me. It's gonna be great, but for now, I need to take a few hours to work on this essay, which is about slave experiences under the Dutch Empire. Yeah, that's what I will be doing for the rest of this afternoon. Really dreary out, and I feel very blah and unmotivated to do this, but I'm just gonna keep drinking my coffee and we'll see how it goes. I put together a Macbeth escape room activity for my class to end off our Macbeth unit, and that was really, really fun. I've been struggling to keep a journal at my own loss. Every day a myriad of thoughts and emotions swirl and swell within me, and I'm unable to put them to rest. I recall my teenage years when sitting at my pages was a necessary ritual, and the only way I survived the tumult of feeling I faced each day. I wish I had the courage and perseverance to go back to that, and to immortalize the days of my 20s as I did the days of my teens. Why is it so hard to make this quiet time to write? I think it is because I labor to write and consider so many other things: essays, video scripts, novels, lectures, and all the other letters of my day-to-day life. The pages that are truly meant to bear my soul remain blank. 'Tis a shame. I must revive this age-old practice of diary keeping if I am to leave any true record of my life, and if I am to unload the burden of my consciousness and free up my mind and soul. For it seems the transient images and ideas in my head are best ordered on paper, and only find true meaning and action in written words. I just finished listening to Mythos, the Greek myth reimagined by Stephen Fry and narrated by the same. The myths have a quality of liberality and waywardness that draws, perhaps to my shame, my heart into them. At a spiritual level, it's difficult to see the value in these tales, for the Greek gods are capricious, lascivious, selfish, indulgent, petty, proud, and vengeful. In short, they stand in sharp contrast to the Christian virtues which Jesus Christ embodied. I do not like the gods and the goddesses, the titans, or the heroes very much. I don't think I would like to be friends with most of them, let alone serve them. As enchanted as the classical Greek world was, it was also full of deceit and danger, and I am grateful not to live in it. But many of the myths are great stories nonetheless, and so I read them with appreciation for their literary and historical value. I've been wondering, why are these such good stories? Why am I naturally enamored with myths, even though I don't believe them to be true, uplifting, or spiritually beneficial? Why are human beings storied beings? Why are we mythological beings? We live out our own personal stories within an even larger story. And as we live, we seek out more stories, the stories of others, to amuse and entertain, but also to add depth, meaning, and nuance to our own stories, and to understand the grand narrative that we are all a part of. To answer these questions, I think it would be helpful to turn to Tolkien and Lewis. I find it really interesting that at one point C.S. Lewis said that myths were lies and basically therefore worthless, even though they were breathed through silver, as he said, and Tolkien kind of set out to convince Lewis otherwise. I just read through Tolkien's mythopoeia, which is his poem about mythology and kind of the mythological impulse of human beings. And I want to read a little section here for you. Tolkien writes, "The heart of man is not compound of lies, but draws some wisdom from the only wise, and still recalls him. Though now long estranged, man is not wholly lost nor wholly changed. Disgraced he may be, yet is not dethroned, and keeps the rags of lordship once he owned. his world dominion by creative act, not to his worship the great artifact. Man, sub-creator, the refracted light, through whom is splintered from a single white, to many hues, and endlessly combined in living shapes that move from mind to mind. And then he says, though all the crannies of the world we filled with elves and goblins, though we dared to build gods and their houses out of dark and light, and sow the seeds of dragons, 'twas our right, used or misused. The right has not decayed, we make still by the law in which we're made. So there's a sense here that human beings are storytellers. We tell stories, we make myths because we were created to. That is who our creator is, a storyteller, right? And we're living out the story that he has written. And so we have this impulse in us to make stories and myths that kind of encompass truths about reality to some extent. If you look at Tolkien's essay on fairy stories, again, he talks about how storytelling, especially myth and fantasy, reflects a fundamental human desire to create and explore worlds beyond our own. Why do humans love stories? Tolkien kind of thought of it in terms of, okay, we're sub-creators, so we participate in God's creative work by creating. God created this world, we create our own worlds in our stories. And so we have this deep-seated impulse to kind of create and to imagine and to mythologize even. He also believed that we wish to kind of see or experience a higher reality, something beyond our mundane, disenchanted world. We want, a world where gods and goddesses, elves and goblins, magic, supernatural things exist and occur. And then Tolkien also has this idea, of course, of eucatastrophes. We want to be consoled through eucatastrophe, which is the sudden joyful turn of events. And often the eucatastrophe is present in mythology and in fantasy stories and fairy tales. Our love of story, according to Tolkien, is not just psychological, but it's theological. So we long for this redemptive story, redemptive narrative. We long for a happy ending. I guess where I'm struggling is to apply this to the Greek myths, because, how can we find truth in the Greek myths? Is this concept of eucatastrophe and redemption present in Greek mythology? Based on my recent listening of Mythos, I struggle to see, I'm struggling to find that, I guess. For example, what is true about the trope of Zeus cheating on Hera with someone and then Hera taking revenge on them by turning them into an animal or something, right? That happens over and over again. It's cheating and adultery. It's sex with everybody. It's revenge. It's defending one's own honor and one's own good, right? The gods are fickle. Artemis, for example, if somebody's not making enough sacrifices to her or spending as much time at her temple or shrine as they are to another god, she gets really ornery and kind of seeks to put that person in their place. This is just how the Greek gods and goddesses act time and time again. Just really self-motivated, really kind of cruel, capricious. They can be good. They can do good things. They can show mercy. For example, I really like Prometheus, who has this deep-seated affection and love for mankind, and he gives them fire and he risks Zeus's wrath, and he gets eternally punished for giving fire to humanity, which was directly against Zeus's wishes, because he wanted humanity to kind of, grovel, right? Not make big advances, not get closer to becoming functional at the same level of the gods. I'm not saying this very well, but I guess I'm just trying to think through, if I were to re-listen to this book or reread this book, approach the Greek myths again, how could I look for truth, look for eucatastrophe? Is it there? What is kind of the moral and spiritual application of these myths? Do they serve that purpose at all? Because according to Tolkien and Lewis, they should. All human myths point to what Lewis calls the true myth, or the myth that became fact, which is the redemptive story of Christ. So how to kind of think about the Greek myths in that light. Let me know if you have any ideas, because I'm just kind of rambling here and working through this as I go. Okay, I'm gonna do some book organizing now, because I just have all these piles and stacks of books all over my house, and I actually have space up here on this ledge right here, so I'm gonna try to put most of them up there and then clear some space just in our living area here, because look, books just sitting here, books just sitting here and here, space waiting to be filled with books. Something exciting is that my school has asked me to curate antique furniture and decor items for our new upper school wing. So I have the spring and summer to go out and find beautiful old desks and bookshelves, maps, globes, just anything that kind of fits the classical aesthetic of our school. So sort of timeless, neutral pieces that have history to them. And antique shopping is one of my favorite things to do. Every time I walk into an antique mall, which there are a number in my area that I visit quite frequently, I always come out with stuff that I don't need, but I just fell in love with and couldn't resist buying. So it's kind of nice to have a really big budget and to be able to go out and do this for my school, because I have no more room in my house for antiques or just things in general. So now I get to kind of satisfy my love of antique shopping and to go out there and kind of enjoy the hunt, but it doesn't need to come out of my own pocket, and I don't get to put it in my own space. But that's okay, because I am so excited about this new upper school wing, and especially the history and literature classrooms. And yeah, it's a big job to completely furnish and decorate the whole thing, but I'm happy to play my part in it. So Zach and I are gonna go to an antique mall this afternoon and see what we can find. Just in advance. It's still several months out before the construction will even be done on the wing, but I'm just itching to get out there and do something. So yeah, that's the plan for this afternoon. Ew, it looks kind of gross though.
Got a couple floaters.
Okay, these are the things I ended up picking up. First is this interesting carved rendition of the Lord's Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. Then there's this. It was hanging on the wall, but it's actually a tray, just with this kind of Egyptian papyrus. Obviously not real or authentic, thousands of years old papyrus, but I think this would look really cool in a classroom. And then there's this jug with knights on it for a medieval-esque piece. And then another ancient Egypt kind of papyrus hieroglyphic print. So yeah. So I just finished the biography of Louisa May Alcott by Harriet Reason, and it was really, really good, really, really interesting. I feel like I know Louisa personally now after reading this, so I just wanted to have a little chat about this book and kind of the takeaways that I've come away with. I think the most interesting thing is how Louisa wrote under a pen name all these kind of pulp fiction stories, stories about adventure and murder, and these really dramatic stories, many of them set in Europe, in castles. And these stories were meant to entertain and to appeal to a wide kind of popular audience. And what's really interesting is that, so Louisa was from an intellectual and a fairly well-esteemed family, but they were quite poor. They struggled. Her father was this transcendentalist and idealist who put his family through a lot, I'd say, for the sake of his ideas, including trying to make them kind of live in this sort of commune on a farm called Fruitlands. That part of the story confused me a little bit, what Bronson Alcott was really getting at. But anyways, so Louisa's childhood was quite unstable in some ways. She moved, I forget if it was like 13 or 14 even 15 times in her childhood, constantly moving, constantly having to deal with debt and a lack of funds. And yeah, she was poor. And part of the reason why, writing came naturally to her, but part of the reason why she wanted to be a writer was to be able to make money to support her family. That was honestly her chief motivation, and that came through really strong in this biography. And it left me with a lot of questions because for the sake of money, Louisa kind of sacrificed true art or literature that had deep meaning, deep moral meaning, perhaps deep spiritual meaning, for the sake of these stories that would sell. And Jo kind of does the same thing in Little Women, which is really interesting. And my heart kind of goes out to Louisa because one's motivation to write, I feel like it should be higher than just to make money and to get famous. But Louisa didn't really have a choice because her family struggled. They needed support. They needed funds. She felt this pressure that she had to be the breadwinner for her family to support her mom and her sisters especially. And there were very few ways for a woman to make money, for a single woman especially, to make money at that time. She had the talent to write. She was able to write really good stories. She had a storied mind. And so this was what she did to make ends meet. And I'm not saying that was her only motivation, but this biography really makes it seem like that was one of her chief motives for writing. And eventually she is wildly successful with some of her later novels and with Little Women, Little Men, and Jo's Boys. She kind of achieves literary success, fame, money, gets all the paychecks, is able to pay her parents' debts off, is able to take a luxurious trip to Europe, support her sisters, well, her remaining sisters, the ones that are still alive, and all these other things, which is super great. So she does fulfill her dream and ambition of being self-sustaining, right? Like financially independent and being able to be the man and support her family. But yeah, it kind of hurts my heart a little bit for her that money and financial problems were what really drove her to write, because I don't have that. I make virtually no money on my writing, and if I could make money on my writing one day, that would be great. But that's not really why I do it, because I'm able to also have a job and make money in other ways. So then when it comes to my writing, I'm able to do that for the sake of art. I'm able to take the time to try to craft really meaningful and kind of philosophical and spiritual novels and stories. Louisa didn't have that luxury or that time to sit around and do that because she needed to pump out story after story to get to the papers to make the money that her family needed. In that way, I feel sad for her, but in a sense, it also makes her admirable because she sacrificed so much for the sake of her family. So I think what I admire most about Louisa and what made her eventually a successful writer was just her grit and her perseverance and determination. And she was driven in part by necessity, right? She had to make that money to support her family. But also, it was out of pure love for the game, out of pure love for writing, out of a drive to write good stories. And I just think it's really cool how she ended up being independent, self-sufficient, successful literary woman in a time where few women were able to paddle their own canoe in that way, as she would say. But she was also so attentive to her family and her loved ones and her roots. She was faithful to her duties. She wasn't selfish, right? Being independent, wanting to paddle one's own canoe, and chase one's own dreams and ambitions does not make one selfless or antisocial. And Louisa is a case in point. She deeply, deeply loved her parents, especially her mother. She deeply, deeply loved her sisters. Her sister Lizzie's death, which inspired the character of Beth, and her death in Little Women, affected Louisa so much. And then spoiler alert, she lost her other sister, May, as well. May died in childbirth. May, the sister who Amy March was modeled off. I'm trying to remember now if her sister Anna, her older sister who Meg March was modeled off, died before or after Louisa. So she lost most of her family members in her life. She experienced tragedy, but that tragedy was only a tragedy because of how close they were, how much love there was in this family, how much she deeply loved her sisters and her parents, and she stayed true to them and true to her roots, while also being her own person, being her own woman, and having her own successes and goals and ambitions in life. That's really inspiring for me because I have deep-rooted ambitions, literary ambitions specifically. I have career goals, I have reading goals, and just so many interests that are personal, right? That are about my own personal intellectual and creative development, for example. And yet, I don't want to be that person that, avoids my duties and sacrifices relationships for those personal ambitions, because at the end of the day, I think relationship is the most important part of my life, of human existence. Being in right relationship with God, experiencing his love and loving him, but then also your neighbor, those around you, your family members, your spouse, your friends. And so finding that balance of remaining part of society, part of your family, part of your friend group, while also pursuing goals that require you to often be on your own and in your own little headspace, in your study, in your library, thinking and working and writing. Finding that balance, I think, is a challenge, but very possible. And I think Louisa shows how that is possible and encourages me to find that way of being in my own life, where I can still be creative, I can still write books, I can still read, I can still study history and teach history, but I'm also present in my marriage, present in my family, present in my friend groups, and seeking to draw closer to God. So yeah, that's where I'm going to end this video. I hope you enjoyed. It was a bit of a random video. Honestly, I'm struggling to come up with really great video ideas these days because I want to make thoughtful videos. For example, videos where I talk about specific books that have impacted me, and I want to put a lot of thought and effort into them, but that takes time that I don't really have right now. So for the next few weeks or few months, I'm not sure what my channel output is going to look like, but eventually I do want to come back with more thoughtful and articulate and well-made videos for you guys. But thank you again for supporting me. I am so grateful that you're here. If you're still watching this, that's incredible. Please do like this video. Please comment any thoughts you have on anything that came up during this video, and I will read your comment and do my best to get back to you. Thank you again, and I will see you again very soon.